with you shortly. We are now live recording, so thank you very much indeed for joining us today. And as the numbers increase, we will be going through a recap of part 1 and then followed by a more in-depth look into part 2 on investment readiness. Now, we do encourage audience participation, but we're not going to allow you to shout, unfortunately. We would like you to use the Q&A, which is available either at the bottom, top, or side of your screen, depending on the device you're using. Please use the Q&A. Don't try and use the chat because it's not being monitored, but the Q&A is the way to talk to us. And we will endeavour to answer all questions, either during the course of the webinar or at the end. So please don't worry, you will not be forgotten. You are not being ignored. Now, today, I'm ably assisted by Emily and Susie, who are helping us with the tech today, and I'm very grateful for their assistance. And our guest speakers are Nitin Patel and William Miller, both of whom work for the university and provide one-to-one mentoring for the businesses who come on board the Angels at Essex equity investment platform. Not everybody comes on board the platform. Sometimes they take the advice that we've provided to them and they take their opportunities elsewhere and are successful in raising elsewhere. And we know that over £12 million has been raised by individuals, founders, who have gone down that route. But for those who have gone through the platform, it's over £32.5 million worth has been raised. And that has been shared amongst quite a large number. So the amounts raised can vary from anything from £250,000 to right the way through to 3 million. So as you can see, that's quite a wide breadth. But it doesn't matter about the amount. If you're only seeking 50,000, we can still help you. So I would now like to hand over, now remember, Q&A, please, for all questions. But I would now like to hand over to Nitin Patel and William Miller, who will take you through the presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, so we're following on from our presentation last week. So there's a slight change in what we're going to do today, but it's also about linking what we talked about to what's needed going forward. So as this is called planning for success, it's almost at a stage where you're very close to investment or you actually got investment. So a lot of discussion around this, and the three of us will talk on the subjects because it's quite varied. So Bill will join in and so will John as we move along. So Bill. Okay, so part 1, we'll review again what we slightly talked about, planning for investment and the areas when you get investment. I always like to tell people, be careful what you wish for. And it's almost a situation where a lot of people really do look for their investment opportunity. When they get it, if they're not prepared, it can be quite daunting. So this is just highlighting some of the areas that you should be thinking about along the lines at the same time as looking for investment. Okay, just to quickly recap, and then I'll let Bill have a little bit of a say on this as well. So last time we talked about the key to getting the investment deck ready was around 3 concepts of validation, business validation, and delivery. And that is what we will talk about going forward in terms of planning with your investment as well. But Bill, if you want to add anything to this.
Well, I think the key thing whenever you're doing the deck is to get the structure of it right, and we'll talk a little bit more of that in a couple of slides. But the important thing is that this is a document that's going out to lots of investors, so you want them to be able to understand it. So make sure that there isn't any technical jargon in it. Just don't assume that because you know a lot of in-depth knowledge that the investor will know it. So no technical jargon, no acronyms, and please spell check the deck because that shows you are paying attention to the detail. One idea per slide if possible, and then complete picture in 15 plus or minus 3 slides.
John, just sorry, Bill, leave that for a minute, because the way we tend to work is myself and Bill look at the deck very early and then we pass it on to John, who does a little bit more due diligence. It'd be just interesting to see how your thoughts are, if any of these areas are really key when you're reading these things. I know you don't make a lot of changes because you trust what we do, but it'd be interesting just to get feedback to think if there's anything that pops out when you're looking at these.
Certainly, because I look at it with a fresh pair of eyes, so as to speak. I know that the deck has been structured properly, and I know that the deck has got content in it. What I'm looking for is, does it tell the story as I flow through, as I read through the deck? Is it leading me on a journey somewhere? And where is that journey actually going? And as I pick out the facts, not necessarily the figures, the numbers, I expect those to balance naively in many cases. But when I'm looking at the facts, I like to double check as an investor would, doing their due diligence. Have they really got this accreditation? Do they really, have they actually researched their market and their competitors, if there are competitors? And if there are no competitors, which a lot of people say, what are the substitutes? What is it they're replacing in the marketplace? And they're the kind of areas that where I look. So I take a little bit of time looking in a bit more detail at those areas which perhaps may have been missed or may not as we go through.
That's good because, you know, obviously when myself and William are looking at this, really want to pick the positives from the story they're telling us, and we tell them to put everything that they can in a positive spin. So it's good to have that check. William, shall we go to the next one?
Mm-hmm. Well,
okay, so as we said, there's some key answers that needs to come out of the deck, and some of the key things that investors look for when they're reading a deck is this team structure. They really want to know how the team's going to get prepared and deliver this, but not to an extent of having a page full of CV for every person. It's trying to get that story across that everyone who's working in the team have a role, and the role is all focused to delivery. Obviously, one of the biggest things that attract investors, intellectual property, and again, it's very important where that is highlighted and reasonably clear to get the understanding of what is actually protected. So again, don't try to make it too complicated. Make sure it's easily understandable. Make sure it's somewhere early. And again, getting that opportunity to protect is a big thing. So if you do have things in your deck that says we've got something that we can protect, make sure before you make that promise in the deck, it's reasonably deliverable, because I'm sure the first question you'd get when someone's asking about that particular point is how far are you down the road? So be very, very conservative in some of your potential objectives, which haven't been actually achieved, but maybe achieved during the period the deck's being assessed by investors. Then if you talk about marketing, again, it's very important that you know your market, and the areas you highlight are also the areas where your particular venture will succeed in. And the final thing is making sure the solution is really easy to understand and how it's going to make money for the investor. So these things are put onto the deck as a potential how you're going to operate the business. As soon as it gets closer to getting investment in, these things need to be pretty much boxed down to a stage where these guys, when you're talking to them about the investment, about the opportunities, are pretty sure that what you're telling them is going to happen. Bill, do you want to add any more?
Yeah, just a comment that the way the structure that we suggest designed to answer the three key questions that an investor will have. Now, all investors are different, and they all have got different backgrounds and different areas of interest. But it's three key questions. One is, what's the problem and the pain point that's being addressed, and how big is that market? And that tells you that there's potential for a business in there. So that's the business concept. The second thing is, how are you going to make money from it? So that's all about how you're going to market it to people, sell it to people, what you're going to charge for it. And that's validating that there is a business there that has the potential to make money and generate a return for the investor's investment. And then the third question that I'm going to ask is, okay, I know that there's a business potential there. I know it can be made to make money, but what happens when it gets into the marketplace? So is there a team there that is capable of delivering it? How does the competition interact? What happens if you've got any intellectual property in the concept that you've got? And can you prove to me that there is some interest in it already, which is about the traction? So those are the questions that we set out to answer.
John, just from a slightly different point of view, what are the things that would sort of annoy you or make you think harder when someone's put a deck in front of you, you've took the call to say, right, I'm ready to invest? What are the things that actually don't fit your perception of what the deck's telling you would sort of turn you away from thinking about investing or even having a second thought? What is it that they really need to make sure, key points that actually stand as they are in the deck generally when they make the first call?
I think I'm an accuracy person, so I like things to be a little more accurate, so that I don't like the fuzzy edges too much. The couple of things that do irritate me are when the founder clearly hasn't got knowledge on how to run and manage and grow a business. In other words, they haven't taken the initial steps of finding out the basics. And as directors of companies, you are regulated and you must know certain things. And if you don't know those things, you are acting unprofessionally as a director, but you're also acting outside of the statute law of the UK. So there are some areas there which I find very frustrating, like when they haven't filed their company's house annual returns and things like that, and they're about to be struck off and they're looking for equity finance. We come across that.
Right. So it's very important. Sorry, it's very important in your opinion to make sure that the deck is as correct at the time, but make sure the things you put in there stand up in time as well, because it's that instant when you're looking at, you want that to relate to exactly what they're telling you will be in the deck. So if they're got, company's house records, don't let it lapse just because it took a long time for you to look at it.
Exactly. And there was a comment that you made at the beginning there about intellectual property.
Yeah.
And, how often do we hear, oh, well, there's nothing that we can actually protect, but have they gone through and done a simple IP audit? And I will throw this out to the audience. We have access to free IP audits, and everybody who comes through the Angels at Essex program is entitled to have a free IP audit. And if you haven't had one, why haven't you had one? And please contact me if you'd like one.
Okay, let's get to the next slide. Okay, so this is pretty similar to the deck, and it sort of highlights some of the key areas and what it's outlining, some of the key things we need in green and what's option. But then at the bottom there, it says, make sure some of the things that John particularly likes to know are also there, or you're ready to answer those questions. So registration details, what terms are you going to talk about if someone rings you up, who are shareholders? I know at the stage of preparing the deck or even putting it on the platform, people can be sort of reluctant to want to tell us or put all that in open public. But I think as soon as you get a call and you are ready to talk to someone who's serious about investing, then this sort of information needs to be readily available. You need to know it reasonably well, or if you're not the person in the team, make sure that the person who has the knowledge is available, because the opportunity is all time-based, just as, and the platform particularly will look in creating opportunities in time and then move on. Bill, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just a couple of comments, Nitin. Although we've said that titled this slide, the slides in the deck, and suggested that this is the a number of slides that you could put in the deck. It's not prescriptive, really, as long as you've got this kind of content in the deck. That's what we're looking for. And the other thing is we don't want every deck to be exactly the same, but we want it to have this content in it. So the green slides show the kind of content that we really would like to see, and then the yellow content is what we would regard as being optional. And the other thing, that Nitin was saying there right at the very end, but just to emphasize it, you are operating in the market with other people, so you've got to be responsive to investors' questions. And so when they're asking you about, have you got your registration details, have you got your articles of association, you need to have those in preparation such that you can respond quickly to them. Otherwise, they may forget about you and move on to somebody else. Now, we do have some pre-recorded webinars already on the YouTube channel, which cover some of this. And we have some webinars upcoming, which will look at the things like the term sheets and shareholder agreements. Those are coming along in the future. So stay tuned to this channel for more.
Yeah, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so now we're starting to talk about the business and some of the key areas that people are very interested in when they're looking at the deck, and also when they want to talk to you, is your knowledge about how you're going to sell. I mean, I've been in business for a long time, and one of the hardest things I've ever found is someone giving me money for what I do. And that's easier when you work for someone, but if you're doing it for yourself, it becomes harder. So always know what the key areas are in where you are sort of wanting to sell, the marketplace, how you're going to present the story that best fits the needs of that marketplace, and a little bit about selling your overall business and how it works, how it does things. It's very important. John?
And also remember, you're selling yourself as well, because you have created this business. This is part of you. And it hurts when people are criticizing what you're doing or picking holes in what you're doing, when it becomes very personal. It's business, and you've got to treat it as a business, and you've got to have your exit strategy as well. But that's later on in the slide.
Yeah. Go on, William, anything you want to add?
Well, I think it's important that anybody looking for equity investment remembers that they are selling part of the business. It is the business and the business opportunity that they're selling. It's not the product and service. And the challenge that you've got whenever you're selling part of your business to an investor is that you can't see what else that investor is looking at. So you're competing in this marketplace where you can't see your competition. And that's always a difficult thing to do. So it means that you have to be as best as you possibly can. Now, you can, if you go into face-to-face pitching events or something like that, you can at least see some of the competition. You can see 3 or 4 other entrepreneurs who will be pitching at that same time. And you can use that as a learning opportunity as well, to see what they're doing and how they present what they're doing and what information they've got and so on. So take an opportunity to have a look at those as well. We always say that if you come onto our platform, just regard it as a channel to get to other investors. We're not precious about you only using us or staying with us. You've got to go and seek investment from wherever you can. So go and do that as well. So moving on.
Okay, so planning for investment. So we've told you all about what's sort of required within the deck and how ready you need to be for the conversation, and the key areas that when people talk to you, they want to really discuss. And this is really based around the concept of the platform. When you are presenting in person, some of that conversation comes direct. So it is quite key that, some of the things we're telling you is specific to the way we deal with the decks on a platform that doesn't have the ability for you to talk to it directly. So going back to this planning for investment, this is where I think you need to do your own due diligence as you get discussions with potential investors, making sure that you're clear about the investors you already got, understanding how they would feel if new types of investors came on, having a little bit of understanding of the sort of potential of bringing new people with the existing people, and identifying the match. And the other part is obviously using the money once it's sort of delivered, ensuring that the plan to do that is pretty much accurate. I know things change, and certainly over a period of time when investment can take sometimes quite a long time, things have to change. But at least have a base from where you can sort of discuss why things have changed. Bill, anything to add?
Yeah, just to, picking up on the comment that you made much earlier, is be careful of what you wish for, because now that you've got investment, two things have happened. You've now got investors, which are new people into the business, and you've got money, which you probably didn't have before, but that's got to be used to do the things that you told the investor you were going to use it for. So it's a changed world that you're in.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. Right, so there's some of the key areas and a little bit more about how and what sort of needs to be prepared if it's not already available. I'm sure most of the people we talk to have a lot of this stuff outlined either in their minds or certainly pre-prepared for those discussions. So it's a standard piece of standard stuff that people are looking for. But let's ask John, who's sort of quite a numbers man as well as business. It'll be interesting to see what are his key areas that he looks for in terms of these documentations. John?
Well, most certainly, when you're looking at the financial documents, the projections, because you're only putting brief summaries into the business plan, or into the pitch deck, I should say. The detail is in the business plan, which doesn't appear until you get into in-depth discussions with the investors. So let's put it this way. Everybody's estimation of how much their turnover is going to increase and their profit is going to increase is pie in the sky. It all comes down to what's real in the real world. And investors will no doubt halve the numbers that you're talking about when they're looking at you, and then be persuaded to go higher. And I think that's something to bear in mind, that whatever you put, people are going to criticize. And the organizational planning, who is going to deliver all of this? Have you thought about the posts that you will need? What skills do you lack that you will need to bring on board to actually make this happen? The investors they may not have those skills that you're looking for, or may not have those contacts you're looking for. So where are you going to look for those?
Okay,
and
let's see what Bill says, who's a less of a numbers man than John, to see what are the key areas here, because I think there, there's a balance as well, and I know people sort of find it hard sometimes to do the numbers. But what would you sort of be looking at?
Well, I mean, I was always told always know your numbers, but leaving that aside, I think numbers come from the customers that you've got, and so you've got to be able to sell to that customer base, and to make the sales, you've got to have a marketing plan in place as well to get the information out there. So it starts and ends with customers, but you've got to find them and then be able to sell to them, close the sale, and that generates the revenue numbers. It's important in all of those stages. What John said there earlier about having the model and being able to discuss with the investor what the model is, but so therefore you've got to be able to monitor what's going on and adjust your assumptions and adjust your model and your expectations and as a result of meeting the reality of doing the business.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. Right, so this is a softer side of doing investment, and part of it is developing that trust, that ability to communicate even when you don't have the time, access to these people, and really being transparent within the context of not giving away your secrets, because these guys and people you're going to have to work with need to have a relationship that you both trust. It needs to be on a regular basis. It needs to be honest and straight, and get that ability to even feel that you can talk to these guys when you've got some bad news. They could support you on certain aspects. It's not something that I'm saying you can go and call every day you have a daily problem while you're developing your business, because that's not what they're investing into you for. They're investing in you because they believe you can do the job and you're going to deliver for them. But they do like to be kept in the loop. The other thing for me, and certainly this is a personal perception, but be timely. Make sure that any stuff that you promise or you say you're going to deliver by a certain time, you do that. William, what's sort of your key takes?
But three things. One is that this is a relationship, and it's a relationship between people, and the relationships between people are very much built on trust and communication. So you've got to be able to trust each other. It works both ways. And to build that trust, it's all about communicating and telling people what's going on. As Nitin says, you don't want to be telling them everything on a daily basis unless that's what they ask for, but develop a way of reporting to them that's very simple for you to complete the report and very simple for them to understand what's happening. Be open and honest about any issues that are coming up, which you might regard as being bad news, but be open and honest because they may be able to help from their experience. And while you're reporting and keeping them up to date on the details and what's happening on a day-to-day or week-by-week basis, don't forget that you're building a business for the long term. So don't forget to build in a focus on the big picture of how the business is going to develop.
John, what's your key things in terms of? I know you like the numbers and facts, but then also what's your driver in terms of people wanting to talk to you about the business that you've invested in?
Well, when I listen to investors who say that, that they're not getting good communication from the founder after they've invested, that comes down to the fact that the founder is so focused on working on their business, they don't realize that they need to be working from outside of their business, not in it all the time. So that's that kind of area.
Okay, so you've raised that question, haven't you, where when you get investors in, there's a whole different dynamics that you have to think about.
Yeah, because your investors are your partners, whether you like it or not. And as partners, you should share information. As it says, don't hide the bad news and keep them informed of progress as you go, so that they are reassured that their money is being handled or being used appropriately.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to let John start on this one. John?
Yes, this is my bane, if you like, being an accountant for many, many years. The cash flow. Cash is king. Profit is, turnover is vanity. Profit is sanity. Cash is king. It hasn't changed. It's always been that way, and it always will do. The majority of businesses fail and go into liquidation because they run out of cash, pure and simple. The reasons behind it are bad cash management, and often aspirations not meeting expectations in that respect. So the words here are be realistic. Be realistic to yourself and to others. And don't get me wrong, you can still run out of cash with investment because we call it runway. How much cash do you need to keep the business up to the point where it is profitable? That is the area of runway. And the burn rate that is mentioned here is the burn along that runway. It's all aligned with aviation. You have a runway and you burn fuel as you're taking off. Once you get up in the air, you don't burn so much fuel because you're actually in the air. And that's what the whole theory behind this is. So keep the numbers tight.
Bill, would you like to overachieve in these things, or do you want accuracy? What's your sort of thought? Because you can almost get to extremes, overestimate it or pessimistic? What are you really looking for as a general trend?
I think as a general trend, you want to be as accurate as you possibly can. You don't want to be, you don't want to be very precise down to 10 decimal points or something like that there, but a realistic, accurate forecast of what's going on. But remember also to take into account your unexpected things that might happen. I'm aware of a business not too far away from me who didn't plan to pay the inland revenue, national insurance contributions and things like that, which came out of the blue and almost sunk them as a business, because while they were planning for the things they could see, they forgot about the things that weren't immediately on the horizon. So you need to be able to have a financial model that you can understand what's happening in the business, will cope with the unexpected, and through which you can run different scenarios to say, if I increase my marketing spend, what's going to happen? Or if the revenue doesn't come in as quickly as I'm expecting, what's going to happen?
Okay, let's get to the next one. This is really an interesting one for entrepreneurs and startup teams, because you have a team when you start up. Most of the time, we're looking for at least 2 people as founders, so they can at least work with themselves and talk to each other. But as investment comes in, as you grow, as you do different things to make sure you can get that business out in the market, you've got to start looking at the organization. And I sort of almost encourage people to think about, even when they first start, of roles and responsibilities between the teams, and then you can sort of actively take pieces of it away and add other people in. But you've got to make sure that when you do get other people on, that you've matched their expectations on what you're telling them as to why they join you, and the same from your point of view of ensuring that they will fit into the way you want to work and build a business. Bill, do you want to add to this? I know this is make or break for a lot of businesses.
Yeah, and it's a big challenge, and it's a big what would you call it, fear factor, moving to hiring a new person who's outside your immediate network or something like that. There, you've got to take somebody on. Usually it's taking somebody on to do the selling or do the marketing, and the question is, are you going to recruit somebody that can do the job in the short term, or are you recruiting somebody that can do a much longer term role? So you're recruiting for the here and now where you've got a role to be filled, or are you going to recruit for a longer term requirement? And that's a challenge as well, is to know which way you're going to fill that role. The other thing to remember, that as you bring people in, you've got to keep them all updated, so you're no longer talking about a small number of people, maybe 1 or 2 where you have conversations all the while, but you'll have double that number, and you've got to keep everybody updated. So how are you going to do that? And bear that in mind as you're recruiting people and bringing them into the team.
John, what's key from your point of view?
Well, the best kind of organizational partnerships work where the opposites attract. So you're not all the same thinkers thinking the same way. You need some kind of diversity in the way that people think. And I think that's quite important.
Okay, let's get to the next one. Bill, do you want to start on this?
Well, if you're receiving investment to develop the product or service, then you've got to work out, how that money is going to be used to develop that particular product or service. So you'll have a development plan that you'll want to put in place. And depending on who's doing that development, you could be doing it with an internal team because you've got those skills, or you could be doing it with an external team. But lots of investors that we talk to, they're always wary of lots of external development being done where there isn't been any proof that a development team can do the work. And so you need to have a good, tight control on external people doing the development, which means you need to plan it out well, define your objectives, what you're going to get as a deliverable, when the milestones are going to be achieved, keep in regular communication with people, allow for the first drop not to be working and allow for testing and rework. Think about building an MVP, minimal viable product, to get you into the marketplace, and then refine that as you go on. It's always good to engage the customer early on so that you're getting immediate feedback, and also involve your own people internally so that they know what's coming down the line that they're going to have to market and sell.
So the reason I let Bill go first is everything he said, I just wanted to do it in half the time. So the challenge, particularly at the early stage, is having to do all this stuff, but in a small period of time. And that's important because, when you're delivering something new to the market, you want it to be new. So when you get to the end of testing and sort of reworking, people sort of think, but you've got to balance that. You've got to get enough of it right.
Yeah. So
people don't turn around and say, this is a waste of time, but don't wait long enough to say everything is 100%. So it's a clear balance. Obviously, in the real big businesses, there's serious money and effort spent around this particular process as they ensure that the market they've created, they don't lose by delivering a bad product. John, anything to add?
Well, with most innovations, they're never perfect. So don't assume that your product or service is going to be perfect when you launch. Microsoft's a prime example. We're still trying to get to the ultimate Microsoft product, which doesn't fail. We haven't got there yet. Sorry, Microsoft. There are other software available. But effectively, you've got to remember that when the product is ready, it's ready. Don't keep trying to improve it.
Okay. Next slide. Okay, so this, I think, as Bill had said in one of the earlier comments, that it's always a challenge for early stage startups because this is actually using money to get yourself out known. And one of the things you don't have at that early stage is money to sort of buy expertise in this area, or even the sort of functional equipments in terms of people who do these things. But it's important that you find a route that allows you to get people to understand you exist, what you do, how you do it. And in today's world, it's actually a little easier, I think. There might be more work because there's so many different platforms for you to sort of look at and make sure you're on. But certainly the opportunity of being able to get yourself out and known, it may not always be the right audience who may be looking at you in various platforms. And that, again, is some work you need to do. But you do have to have a plan. And stick to the plan and give it your best effort to get people to know what you do, how you do it, what you're presenting. William?
Yes, this all comes down to this business. So marketing is that challenge, and you've got to spend money to do it. In an early stage business, you haven't got a lot of money to spend on anything, and particularly on marketing. So you've got to understand your customers and where they're going to get their information from. So it helps to work out your ideal customer persona, so that gives you some kind of guidance on the channels that they'll be using to get access to information. And then build your marketing plan, work out the challenge you're going to the channels you're going to go to, monitor that to see which ones are most effective, and then don't spend on the ones that aren't working and spend more on the ones that are working. And while there are lots of platforms out there that you can use to get the information out, they change the way they work, and they change their algorithms, and they change the rules. So it's important, if you're not an expert in that area, to engage some expertise. And that could be an external company itself, or you could recruit somebody with the expertise into the business to do it. And just simply monitor and adjust what you're doing to make maximum effectiveness of your marketing budget.
John, just from a sort of, I know, big companies have KPIs and sort of measure how much of the money goes to what sort of channel and what the sort of return is. But what do you think an early stage investor's sort of perception is when people say, I'm going to spend an X number of pounds in marketing? What they're looking for in terms of the plan to make sure that it's not a wish of, wanting to sort of be out there and say, I want to be on LinkedIn, or it's not a wish to say, I'm just going to throw lots of effort. What do you think they're sort of wanting, one as a plan and two as an outcome?
Well, I'm going to go back to basics here, because if you're launching a new product into a new market, the sky's the limit, obviously. But I would expect to spend at least 19% of my turnover on marketing. So give it that kind of ratio, it's a fifth. And I think that's something to bear in mind, that people don't realize that. And that's going to continue for some time until you get your product or service established in the marketplace.
Okay, so the challenge obviously there in terms of those numbers is you've got to be able to clearly define what you're going to do with that amount from the investment that's coming to you. There's obviously an expectation from most investors that there will be some money spent in this area, and there's an expectation that they will hopefully know exactly how you intend to spend it. Now, it's not a science, as we say, and I always say to Bill, marketeers always know what they want after you tell them what it is that you're going to give them. So that's your challenge, is trying to guess what they want before they know they want it. But part of it can be based around science, trials. The other part is about being ready to react to feedback. William, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that covers it. We'll go to the next.
Let's go to the next one. Right. John, come on. I'm going to start with you. Numbers, sales. When do you stop worrying, or when do you start worrying when things are not happening on the sales pipelines in terms of a startup?
Well, we mentioned earlier about the different sales channels, B2B, B2C, using agents, using all sorts of other methods of getting the sales out there. How reliable, how can that work? This thing about ensuring all leads are followed up. It is amazing how many founders don't follow up a lead from an investor, believe it or not. It's quite incredible. They don't realize that they should respond very quickly. And it's exactly the same when you're selling to customers. All customers are valuable. Customers cost a fortune to get, and then they cost a lot more to maintain and look after. The invoicing process, T's and C's, regulatory requirements, they're all there. It's all in front of you. But you've got to know it like the back of your hand. And what is the law about warranties in the UK? And how does that affect you? You know, all this kind of stuff. Service level agreements. You need to have this to hand all the time.
So what we're saying is you have to have a knowledge enough to be able to talk sensibly about how you're going to go do this as your business grows. Some elements you need, because by law, you can't do certain things with certain type of products without having insurance or service level agreements and stuff. Other things you have to sort of work out as you develop your sales plan, as you get reaction from the market. But one thing there, John said, and again, it's a key to that relationship. If the investor tells you that he thinks he can help, then do it, because there's two things there. One is he'll understand it's not as easy as he thinks, because sometimes, you know, it's not about just the relationship, it's also the product and the knowledge. So when you do make that call and it doesn't sell, you feed back to him, at least he knows that what he perceived to be an easy connection, easy sell, isn't as easy. So do always follow up these things, particularly in your early days when you're either struggling to make the timing of the sales or making the sales to the numbers. William, anything to add?
Yeah, for me, it's important that, you know, that you do sell stuff from the business, because that's ultimately where the rubber hits the road. So the sales generate your revenue. But as John says, you know, once you've made a sale, then there's a whole lot of other things that are resulting from that. So you've got to do your invoicing. You've got to understand how you deal with your customer. What happens if they give you a return, and all of those kinds of things. So there's more than just making a single sale to a customer. Once you've got the customer, then you've got to keep them and deal with them. And it's important to understand what your sales process is and who is actually doing the selling. The worst thing that can happen is you've got two people trying to chase the same customer and selling them different things from the business, particularly when you're in an early stage business. One of the things I always suffered from in a large enterprise was salesmen selling things that didn't exist, and then you've got to work out how you can deliver that. But in a much smaller business, you should be able to control that. So,
okay, finally, then let's
Finally.
summarize where we are. So as you can see, we've took you through the deck in the very early stage, and then some of the key areas that we feel need to be in the deck, and some of the key things you need to know about when investors are going to talk to you. So John, do you want to tell us what is the key area out of the 4 things that you really want people to focus and make sure? I know we want it all, but there's obviously something that stands out from an investor point of view in your eyes that they can't make mistakes or can't be a little iffy on.
All investors love a story. They like to be led into the project. So that's important. The factual information, get it right. Anything that's wrong will immediately turn an investor away. They won't look any further if they find a fact that is not true. And make sure that you look very carefully at the content and you understand it and can, if questioned, talk about it.
Okay, William?
yeah, we focus a lot on getting the investment deck ready and correct and to the best possible state that it can be in order to tell that story. But remember, as an entrepreneur, there's an awful lot more hard work has to go into it in terms of providing the supporting documentation, providing all the detail that the investment deck summarizes. So it is hard work, and you should be prepared to do that. It's not an easy road, but it can be a good road and an enjoyable road if you make success from it.
Okay, so from my point of view, the thing, I like both of those things, obviously, because we've all sort of worked together and built the sort of concept of what works on the platform. But one of the things I really do push people when I see the deck, when I see the investment, everything coming together, particularly if they're making a product or they can get a model of something that looks like it, I think it's very important to have that opportunity to show people. It's amazing, certainly in my sort of view, how much more traction people find talking to someone when they said, you know, I've got this particular product, but I've got a model of it, either whether it's 3D or whether it's even a 3D dimensional sort of graphics. But it is important. And I know sometimes that's some money to be used, or you may not have the skill sets to actually do all of that. So one of the things I would say is, as well as having this, is the ability to try and show something that is practically what your sort of proposition is looking like, even if it's software that they can sort of look at a format that how the screens may look, or if it's certainly hardware, then, you know, there's quite a number of technologies that allow you to create a prototype that can look like it. But that's my view in terms of what would attract me if everything was equal, to say someone's gone to the next stage and actually look, they've got something that looks like what they're trying to get me to invest in. So that's bringing the end to our sort of presentation. I know there's some questions there. There's certainly 2 or 1. And John, do you want to sort of take them and then we can address them?
Yeah, sure. I'll start in the order that they came in. At an early stage, pre-revenue, what metrics, if any, should I include in investor updates? So presumably we're talking about someone has already invested and it's a pre-revenue business.
So my thoughts on that are particularly around sales. And if that revenue and the investment is around the potential, particularly of the sales coming in as the product's been made ready, then I think it's very important that you sort of highlight all your opportunities, try to categorize them at different stages of their involvement, and show the investor how they're moving along. And it doesn't need to be numbers. It can be, you know, a discussion on a very sort of defined definition of this is an inquiry, this is what this guy's done. It might. So I think he then can be able to see how things are progressing. So that, to me, if everything is equal and you've got most things balanced, the one area I would really like to know about is how you're getting money from people, or how close are you getting to it in time. Bill?
Yeah, I guess, and following on from that, I guess it depends how far away you are from revenue. If you've got your product or your service in place and you are now just getting into the sales cycle, then that would be what you would do. If you're earlier than that and still doing the development, then you would probably want to update them on the product and development phase and what's happening there. But it comes back to what's the relationship with the investor. You want to be explaining to them the things that they want to know about, because they are, as John said earlier, they are your partners in the business. So you're keeping your partner updated about the information that they've asked for. And so you should think of a little report on a page covering the different areas. Key areas would be money that's being spent, what's happening in terms of that development phase, what's happening in terms of sales, what other conversations are going on, those kinds of things that you want to tell the investor about and that they have asked for.
Thank you. I'll jump to this question, and forgive me, Rob, if I've misinterpreted what you've put, because it's not abundantly clear to me. But I think Rob's question is asked about the fact that our platform enables investors to look at the pitch deck. So in other words, it is definitely a shop window where your wares will be on display for the investor to look at. And so you don't get the opportunity to actually stand there and talk at the same time, nor do you get the opportunity to present with the passion that you would present with as you were presenting. So it's very much a cold document in that respect. But when it comes to the wording can still contain a certain amount of passion. In fact, it's needed in that document. So it's a fine balance between fact and passion to actually deliver the story that I mentioned earlier. I hope that's what you're asking, Rob.
Just to add to that, Rob, myself and William, when we first speak to people who want to get onto the platform, is exactly what we do, is to try and let you get through the deck that you've got and see how much input you have to put into that deck for us to understand. And then we try and give you feedback to say, look, you said something here that made me understand clearer, but it's not on the deck. So it is about trying to get that balance without too many pages. And, you know, some people do it really well. Some people we work with really struggle because, you know, they're so used to being able to speak to it. But the benefit of the platform, as we said to a lot of these guys and to you, it's free in terms of cost. Is time, obviously, in what we ask you to prepare, but then it can be part of many areas you're looking for investment. And as John has said, outside of the platform, once people are on, they come along and say, we've got the money, and that sort of triggers other things. So it is an overall scenario of investment that you've got to measure when you're looking for which areas or where you put your deck or where you put your effort. William, anything to add before we finish?
If I can just quickly comment that sometimes you can get the passion across by having an early slide which explains your own personal interest in the business concept. So it may be a personal story that has made you realize that you want to create this business. And later on, as you're talking about the current status, your passion may come across because of the examples of the types of businesses you've already spoken to or the grants you've already got, those kinds of things which demonstrate your commitment to the business or even how much investment you've already put into it.
And to answer Robert's question, the platform is FCA regulated. We do not handle cash. We do not handle the money. All investment is made directly by investors into the businesses direct, and they undertake their own due diligence. But it is a showcase, just like the UK BAA deal share platform. And yes, we have organised pitch events. And I would say that when we organise pitch events, We normally allow no more than 5 or 7 minutes for a pitch, which means you will need a totally different deck to pitch, because you could certainly not get through 15 slides in 5 minutes, even if you talk really fast, like a news commentator or a day at the races. So bear that in mind. We are regulated, and yes, we are a showcase.
Okay, there's one more question I think they've gone up by Marcus, who's asking whether if he had a letter of intent, what should he do? William's always good at encouraging people to take the minimum to maximize. But Bill, do you want to tell them how they should be reasonably balanced but use any advantage they have?
Yeah, well, it comes down to, you know, I would put that information in the current state. As you know, we've already developed the minimum viable product. We've shown it to this company. They've provided us with a letter of intent. And whenever we get to a certain point, then that letter of intent will be converted into an order. And so we see that on a few occasions where entrepreneurs are ready to move into the sales cycle, and they've got out, spoken to businesses, they've got letters of intent, and it's always a good thing to have and to demonstrate to the investor that there is a market interest for what you're doing.
Okay, John, I think you've got one more question about the pitching, and then I think we're near the end there.
Yes, Robert, yes. We don't do solo pitches. It's a waste of investors' time, and we are a free resource. So all our pitch events are actually in groups, normally half a dozen, no more than half a dozen pitching at any one time. And we have done them live, and we have done them virtual as well. And we have none planned for the next month or so. So there's no need to worry about that. They are available on YouTube, the ones that we have done, and we will be loading up our last series of pitch events as a sequence very shortly. They are still in editing mode. These were done in association with Brit Asia TV, so that they would be made available on Freeview and Sky. Those are the areas that we look at. So have a look at our YouTube channel. You will find some pitch events there already. And Tracy, yes, we will be uploading these as PDFs on our UEZ Angels at Essex webpage in due course.
Okay, well,
that's all the questions answered. So it goes without saying, thank you very, very much indeed to William and Nitin for their presentation today.
And John.
I'm just here to support you guys, you know that. And I just point out our next webinar is on Thursday, the 11th of May from 2 till 3, and it features Colin Downing from the accounting firm BDO. And Colin has worked with us for the last 3 years, and we regard him as our person to go to for investor tax relief, SEIS, the Enterprise Initiative Scheme, or Enterprise Investment Scheme, I should say. I always get that one wrong. And S is for small firms. Now, these allowances go up this year. They're in the process of going through the system, and you need to know how this is going to affect you as a founder in raising equity investment, because the tax relief to the investor is an incentive. And you will find that more and more investors are using the tax relief route as a matter of belt and braces when they're investing. So book your place with Eventbrite on our Eventbrite UEZ University Enterprise Zone Investment Channel. I am now going to bring this to a close. We've just overrun by a minute, for which I do apologize. It's probably my talking. And as I say, this has been recorded and it will be made available on YouTube as soon as we can get it edited and all the bleeps cut out. So once again, thank you to my panelists, William Miller and Nitin Patel. Thank you very much indeed, sincerely. And to Susie and Emily for sitting in the background and making sure this runs smoothly. So thank you once again to my audience, and be safe and goodbye.